Ease the revenue strain?
Do you have a question to ask, or do you have some sort of position you're trying to forward?
I'm an editorialist with a camera, basically. Did you take have you volunteered to take a salary cut? What is your salary?
I don't answer questions like that, sir.
Mr. Joyce, yeah, I do have a couple of questions for you. You've been at Dave Ridley with RidleyReport.com. You've been advocating for additional revenue sources, but you're currently in the education system, is that correct?
Yes, I'm an educator, yes.
Have you volunteered to take a tax or a salary cut to help ease the burden on taxpayers? Or ease the revenue strain?
Do you have a question to ask, or do you have some sort of position you're trying to forward?
I'm an editorialist with a camera, basically. Did you take have you volunteered to take a salary cut? What is your salary?
I don't answer questions like that, sir.
What is your salary, if I might ask? How much do taxpayers have to pay you? Would you benefit from an income tax? Personally? Thank you very much.
They're afraid they're going to increase spending. That's why they say no all the time. So you have to come out with a mechanism to put some fairness in the tax structure without allowing the legislature to spend the money. My platform was, and I would always look for it.
But if they're not paying that at all, did the feds take that into account?
It's important to keep in mind that that's an average figure for that group. So the bottom 20%, 8% on average. So people at the very bottom.
Ms. Silver, are you ready to talk now?
I just want to have a good conversation with a libertarian.
We can get out of the way now.
Excellent.
Yeah, I guess my first question would be,
yeah.
I mean, is there ever any instance ever in history where a state has imposed an income tax and then actually seen the overall tax burden drop?
You know what?
Or stay the same?
You know what? I am not an expert in these matters, but you can go to our website to the frequently asked questions, and there is one of the frequently asked questions that addresses this in some detail. I know that others, when you say, wait a minute, to say the overall tax burden drops, or?
Yeah, I'm talking about the overall tax burden for the average person.
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that kind of question. I'm not a policy expert. Mainly what we do is sort of convene the experts.
Well, let's go back to the point where we agree. It's there somewhere, and I think we both agree that aggression is a bad thing. How is
except, well, I don't know, but let's say for the sake of argument,
by certain definitions, aggression is a bad thing.
No, I think it's some, actually I don't know that I would globally agree, because I could imagine hypothetically, and probably if I sat down to think about it, there would be some examples where it would be a good thing, so I don't even know, do we need that premise in order to proceed?
I like to start from the point of agreement where possible.
Well, let's
assume
bracket that.
Violent aggression is bad.
All right, well, let's just assume, where are we getting, and then we'll see what...
Well, I guess my question is, what do you think should happen to me if I refuse to pay this tax?
If you refuse to pay what tax?
This income tax, were it to come down the pike.
Why are we going to start with refusing to pay a hypothetical tax? Why don't you refuse to pay a tax that we already have?
Oh, I already do. I'm a tax resister.
Oh, are you?
I currently don't pay the federal tax.
So let's just put it right where it is. I mean, hypothetical aside, there's taxes right now, and you refuse to pay them, and your question to me is, what do I think should happen to you?
Right, because I plan to do the same thing with the New Hampshire tax, probably, that I do with the federal tax.
If you are residing in New Hampshire and you're paying at all for your residence, then you are already paying property tax one way or another.
Right.
So
I understand what you're saying.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's just assume.
Well, you pay it even if you don't rent. You pay, through higher prices of goods.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're paying it. So, but let's just say, okay, your question is, what do I think should happen to you if you refuse to pay your tax? You know what? I don't even feel like that's my. What does it matter what I think should happen to you?
You have to take You have to take responsibility for your actions. If you're advocating for additional revenue sources, you're advocating that they be taken forcibly from the people of New Hampshire. Now, they may not be taken at the point of a gun directly,
Nah, that's
but
not
if
what
someone
I'm
doesn't
advocating.
pay it, they're going to go to jail or they're going to get in big trouble.
So this isn't a question that I find terribly meaningful. I don't think what I, random citizen, or I, director of the Granite State Fair Tax Coalition, personally believe should happen to you if you break a law. I don't think that's a useful question to ask. Do I think that as a society, as a civilization, that we as Americans or we as New Hampshireites have generally decided that we agree that it makes some sense to pool our resources for certain things, to provide things that individuals, families, and towns cannot provide on their own?
They're providing,
yes, I believe that.
They're providing things like putting people in jail for having the wrong plant in their house. They're providing 6-month sentences for driving suspended. That's what they provide to the New Hampshire people.
Right, and so my point, though, is to the extent that we have a democracy, and I would certainly agree with people that our democratic system is not all that democratic. That there are plenty of reasons, and I would in fact argue that in some ways it's a fiction to even call it a democracy. But to the extent that we have one, to the extent that the foundation of democracy is there, we have the potential as a people to have our interests represented better than they're currently represented right now. What's our voting participation rate? It's not 100% of eligible voters. So the law about locking you up for having a plant in your house, the law for locking you up for whatever thing you don't happen to think should be a law, there are mechanisms in place to change those laws. And we have a history.
I'm sure you saw how effectively those mechanisms were used by a large number of people, and they still couldn't get a change, even the slightest possible change, in the marijuana laws, which are completely victimless crimes. This is what they do, not this. The government schools, that's just part of it.
You know what? But if you built the grassroots will on that, if you organized on it, it's not to say that it's impossible simply because it hasn't happened. We just passed gay marriage in this state. Now that wasn't an easy thing to do. That was the result of a lot of organized effort of bringing people of like mind together. And thank you.
You're welcome.
And and exercising their democratic rights. So just because you haven't achieved it yet doesn't mean you won't achieve it. Could this democracy be more responsive? Could people be more involved? Could it be more effective? Could the laws be changed to more to my liking and more to your liking? Absolutely they could. But there are mechanisms in place, and we either exercise them to their max or we work to improve them.
Now, I have a completely unrelated question just about the forum itself. I understand the Josiah Bartlett folks were allowed to come to the one in Keene. Why was there no...
Please, stop. Allowed to come. I invited, personally.
You're right. I
Charlie,
stand corrected.
Okay. I sat down with Charlie, had a Garlinghouse, the president of the Josiah Bartlett Center. We've had a really good conversation. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on a whole lot of things. I invited Charlie to present at as many of these forums as he could fit into his schedule. Unfortunately, the Keene one was the only one that he had time to do.
Okay. I don't think you have a responsibility to provide a platform for anyone else necessarily.
No,
I was just curious. People have been asking
allowed.
about it.
It was, first of all, allowed. I mean, I invited. I asked all these people to participate in these forums, and I invited him too.
I'm guilty of using the wrong word,
okay,
but you're guilty of attempting to take money out of my wallet. That's what I have a problem with.
I personally am not taking money out of your wallet.
No, not personally. You're going to delegate it to somebody else. That's the problem I have.
I understand that. I don't see it the same way you do, but that's okay. Let's move on to a more interesting question.
No, I'm out.
You're out of questions?
I appreciate you being accessible and talking to me at some length.
Always happy. Listen, can I just tell you a little story? I think you're going to like it.
Of course.
So after the Keene Forum, there were two Free Staters there, and one of them, and he's told me his name twice, and I've already forgotten. But he came up and he had a question about why didn't we legalize marijuana, and how much revenue could we make for it. Now, I will confess to not having let that question question rise to the top of the pile, just because I think it's a non-starter in the state of New Hampshire right now. But I did have a conversation afterwards with him, and I said, look, the way to advance this cause, because he was talking to me about, his civil liberties being violated, and I said, okay, fine, but maybe the way to get this, to pass this in New Hampshire, is to show how much money it would save the state if you decriminalize marijuana, and look at all the associated expenses and add them up and say that you could give this much savings to the state. And then I introduced him to Charlie, and I said to him, you need a think tank to help you figure this out. And I introduced him to Charlie, and I actually think it's a fine idea. I think we need everybody's ideas on the table, and that one could well save the state several $1 million. So I don't want you to have the idea that we're keeping anybody out. We really do want all ideas on the table.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Ms. Silver. I'm saying that right? Is it Kathy Silver?
Kathy Silver.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.
Freedom is pretty.